I always say that people don't leave companies, they leave managers or leaders. And, you have to build relationships with people. Something that I worry about a lot, we're using a lot of remote people these days. We're losing a lot of, I'm a in the office kind of person. I like to be in person. I think part of that is just being able to be around people and build those relationships. But the reality is that's not our world so much anymore.
I feel like we are deep down yearning for work and the relationships that we have in work to fulfill some of those gaps that might be in our life. And this is a real opportunity for leaders today to think about, how does our organization fill some of those gaps by making people feel seen, validated, and heard? Because I feel like secretly we're yearning for that sense of connection, but it's tougher than ever with distributive teams and remote teams. All right, guys, welcome back to a brand new episode of the Hart Hustle podcast. Now, today is an incredibly important episode because I'm sitting down with Erin Stern, the president and founder of Steps Behavioral Health. Now, today's conversation is all going to be about the growing demand for autism and disability services. We're going to talk about her personal journey to being an amazing entrepreneur and founder of this business. I also want to intertwine some of the entrepreneurial spirit that maybe she got a little bit of inspiration from in her family. We're going to talk about leadership. We're going to talk about the process of growth through sometimes saying no. We're going to talk about the role that innovation and technology play in this space and so much more. Erin, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me. I'm excited to be here.
So Erin, if you had to be described by someone else and work was not involved, how would you hope that they describe you?
I would hope that they would describe me as somebody who was sympathetic and empathetic, somebody who was caring, somebody who was kind, somebody who wanted to help others.
I think that's a big part of your journey, right? I mean, I know that you started out in the education space as a special education teacher. You came across some opportunities to think a little bit bigger. And we'll dive a little bit into that in the podcast, but I want to know kind of what is your origin story? Like, who is the individual who's sitting across from me? Where did we grow up? What type of influences do we have as a child? Let's talk a little bit about you.
For sure. Well, I always wanted to be a teacher. I think education was kind of in me from the start. It's interesting. I found like a kindergarten notebook that said, who do you want to be when you grow up? And it was, a teacher. So that was always kind of in me. As I got older, I ended up in a position at a job at a camp that had a special needs program and I was a swim instructor and ended up with a group of, I think it ended up being like 6 boys with disabilities. And I was like, okay, they really ended up kind of changing my path that summer. I have one cousin with autism. And so, it was something that I knew about and, he was a cousin, somebody who I knew and I cared about and loved. And besides that was really my experience.
Was this when you were like a teenager or this was in high school?
I was in high school. I was either in my junior or senior year of high school. And I started working on the weekends through the JCC, the Jewish Community Center. I ran some like athletic programs for kids and some recreational programs for kids with disabilities. There was a program called Sunday Fun Day where kids could come and the families could drop off their kids. And I loved it. So it really became, a passion. Through college, I went straight through the special needs, special education track. I knew that's exactly what I wanted by that point. I then was provided the opportunity at that camp to become a director of their special needs teen program. I started a program for teenagers. There was a group of children that became, kind of was phasing out of camp, but they needed a place for them. So I started a camp program for them. And that was a great opportunity. My father is an entrepreneur. He started a CPA firm and, I watched him grow it and develop it as I was a child. And I learned a lot, from watching that. That was not an easy role for him. And well, it was an easy role for him because he loved what he did. What wasn't easy is growing any business wasn't easy, but we always talked about, careers and jobs and what my career path would be. And I always knew education was one of them. I didn't exactly know this was going to be where I was going to end up. Started teaching. I loved it. I taught for 10 years in special education in public schools. I taught in self-contained classrooms, in special needs, all special ed schools. I taught inclusion. I loved it. I really, really loved it. I loved the families. I loved the kids. The politics got hard, and it got hard to navigate, and I felt like I wasn't able to provide the families and the children with the authentic services that I wanted to provide. So while I was in graduate school, I learned about ABA. I decided to become a behavior analyst, a BCBA, board certified behavior analyst. And I remember meeting with, his name is Dr. Vincent Carbone, and we did like a professional development with him. And I remember talking to him about graduate school and ABA programs, and he said to go to FIT and go that route. So I did. I signed up, and that started that journey. And I stayed with Howard County through that certification process. And I started STEPS and worked with some families after school, some teenagers, some young adults. I loved it. Again, some of them were kids that I worked with at camp, so the families knew me. I would go into their homes at night, help them with their routines, showering, just getting them some independent skills, going out into the community with them, and I absolutely loved it. And then when I had my first child, I decided, let's give this a try. And I became certified with insurance companies and paneled and credentialed. And I decided to take the leap from the school system. About a year and a half after that, I met my business partner.
What an amazing journey.
Yeah.
I want to take a couple steps back and talk about the process of being a teenager, right? Going to a summer camp and then realizing that you had a passion for working with kiddos with disabilities. Did you come home and tell your parents about this experience? Did you validate the experience against anybody? Because being that young and working with this specific demographic of people has to kind of seem a little bit, I would say, daunting. But obviously you had a passion for it very early. So what were some of those early discovery conversations like?
I never stopped talking about it. I mean, I loved it. I loved it. There was one little boy specifically that I talked about and I worked with, and he was terrified of the pool. And myself and another counselor worked with him, and we laugh, now actually with some of the things that we did. Looking back, we probably wouldn't have done it the way that we did it, because knowing what we did, we wouldn't have done it the way that we did it. But long story short, by the middle to a couple weeks into the summer camp, he went under the water independently. And the smile that came up after he went under the water, and he was almost independently swimming by the end of the summer. And it was
Wow.
life-changing. It was absolutely huge. I still know this young man. He's still somebody who I see out in the community. I know his family. I know his parents. I talk to them. It's, he's now in his 30s. So he was 5, when I knew him and when I worked with him. So he was a little guy. It was life-changing. I wrote my college entrance exam, or entrance essay, on that experience. So it was pretty life-changing. From there, I think going into my senior year, I was teaching at another swim club. And I said to them, put some ads out. I will teach special needs swimming. And I remember working with a couple of kids with some very significant special needs. They had a therapy tank at that pool. And I used to take this kiddo off. And I remember the lifeguards being terrified. It was the same pool that Michael Phelps used to train at.
Oh, wow.
In Baltimore at Meadowbrook. And so he was probably there training while I was there. He was only a couple years younger than me. It was funny because the lifeguards would literally all turn their chairs because they were terrified that something would happen to him in the pool. And I would just take him and we would walk and I would sing songs and just stretch his muscles in the water. And it was so therapeutic and I loved it. And I worked with several kids there and I loved it. And then from there, in college, I started working with remember if this was actually in college or after. I think this might have been after college. I worked with a group of kids that was doing an assisted ice hockey league for kids with autism. And so we were, teaching ice hockey. Not that I had much ice hockey experience, but some brothers that played ice hockey. So I'd hop on and help with communication and behavioral stuff on there. And I just loved it. It was natural for me. It was easy. It was fun. I felt that connection and I ran with it.
And you also had some really close to home opportunities to lean into your dad. I mean, he's the guy who's an entrepreneur, starts his own CPA and starts to help people. What were some of the conversations that you guys had early on about like, hey, Dad, I want to start a business in this space? This is near and dear to my heart because this is a conversation I had when I was 23 with my dad. He was a successful entrepreneur. I came home after a terrible day at a summer job, working in the heat all day. And I said, I want to be an entrepreneur like you. How do I do it? Did you have some of those conversations?
We did. I don't remember. I want to say he started the conversation. I think he was kind of like, you're going to be a teacher. And not that he looks down on teachers, but I think he was worried that I wouldn't be able to be independent, financially. And that was something that really stressed him out. He wanted to ensure my independence and my, just to be able to be, successful that way. That was really important to him. And so he kept saying things like, well, what do you think about having like a practice? And so we started talking about it and I was like, yeah, I would love that. Like, what does that look like? And so we started talking and that was really early on. I was probably in my very early 20s. And so I really went into, even when I started my first job as a teacher, with that idea that I was going into teaching in order to get the knowledge and the background to grow my craft so that I could take it and run with it.
This is really important. I want to talk about this intentionally. So often we think that when we kind of have a vision for the future, we often need to get into seasons of earning instead of seasons of learning. And it sounds like you were very intentional about saying, this is just a platform that I'm going to use to gain my skill set and my knowledge so I can do what I want to do.
Correct. Yeah, no, there was no season of earning with that. It took a really long time. It's like a very, very long time. There was, no money to be earned for years and years. It wasn't about that. It's been always about learning the craft and doing, kind of for others and for the families that I've tried to work for. It's really, I've been very motivated by that, to the point where at some point my husband said to me, like, you're not running a volunteer organization. Like you need to make some money at some point. But I remember my father saying to me, like, let's write a 5-year plan. And so like on the back of napkins, we'd start writing volunteer. I remember being in a sushi restaurant and writing down a 5-year plan and writing like a mission statement. And this is what we're going to do. And then like walks on the beach. Every summer we go to the beach and, he and I would talk about it and develop the idea a little bit more. And then, I'd get to grad school and it would develop a little bit more. And okay, this is what you need to do next. And in 2008, I created the LLC and it was just me at that time, and I was working with just families one-on-one and that's what I was doing. And it wasn't until 2018 I met my partner, my business partner, when, steps really started to change.
In order for us to be able to build what we want, right, we have to come from experiences of what we don't want. Early in the conversation, you had mentioned, I can't give I forget what word you said, but like the attention, and I didn't get the opportunity to do the things that I wanted to inside of the education environment. Can we kind of talk about some of that and then talk about how we went into steps?
Sure. So when you're in a school system, there's, the way that IDEA works, the Individuals with Disabilities Education Act works, is your job as an educator and working in a school system is your job is to deliver an education, and your role as a teacher is to ensure that you are teaching the educational core standards. the challenge that I struggled with was many of the students, all of the students that I was working with were really needing life skills, activities of daily living, skills that were going to help them much more globally. And I remember being in a conference with a family, and I was so excited. I had spent, I can't even tell you how long, and I'd spent a really, really long time on this. I think it was possibly the Titanic, or maybe it was Charlotte's Web. And I had taken the entire book. It was a third grade book. And I rewrote the book with core language. So it was all language that they were learning, and it was very basic language. And we worked on WH questions and all this like beginning, middle, and end, all these like educational concepts. And I was so proud because her daughter did awesome with it. She did such a great job. And I was really excited and really proud to tell this mom. And this mom was like, that's great. But like, I'm so really thankful that you taught her how to go to the bathroom. You potty trained her. And I am so thankful for that. But my daughter cannot put her pants on. She is going into fourth grade. And I was like, you're right.
A refocus of priorities, right? Value, I guess, that we can provide.
And I remember bringing that back to my supervisors at the county level. And they were like, but that's not your job. That's the parents' responsibility. And I remember thinking to myself, and I wasn't a parent at this time, but I remember thinking to myself, if her parents could have done that, they would have already done that by fourth grade. Fourth grade, you have a 9, almost 10-year-old. And I was so frustrated. I was like, this is the problem right here. What's the problem? Like, we're really messed up here. Doesn't matter that she understands Charlotte's Web.
Yeah.
It just doesn't. Like, I'm glad that she enjoyed the story. That's great. But like, we could have spent this much time on that and this much time on opportunities out in the community where she could have gone swimming and practiced changing her clothes in a natural environment where she could have gotten all these life opportunities. And at that point, I was just like, I got to figure out the next step. So, I had to, it took still a couple years from there because I had to figure out how to get there. But
I mean, this is something that I love about entrepreneurship in itself. And in a previous conversation, I'm just going to put it on the table. You said, I don't consider myself an entrepreneur, but from the journey that you've been on and what you've accomplished to get to here, you are a part of this brotherhood and this sisterhood, because we've all been through the experiences where we come from a system, if that makes sense, where they tell us to provide a certain service or value. And then you go out into the marketplace and you present this service or this value proposition and say, look what we did. And then the customer on the other end says, that's great, but this isn't really what I need. And that is almost like a aha moment of enlightenment that says, man, maybe I've been participating in like a fraudulent environment, if that makes sense. And I need to change up the way in which I serve the people who I'm so passionate about meeting where they are. So now we get into the formulation of the LLC. We're providing services to individual families. Now we talk about meeting our business partner. So what was the opportunity that the business partner brought to the relationship? Was it a different perspective? What was it?
Yeah. So my partner, Sam, it was interesting. It was a cold call kind of situation. He owns, him and his wife owns the Therapy Spot in Baltimore, which is a pediatric speech OT and PT clinic. And I drove past their clinic one day, and I didn't know about them. I didn't know who they were. And I called them and I was like, hey, I'd like to meet with you. This is what I do. And Sam was like, come on in, let's meet. We did. And at that time, they weren't ready to really kind of explore ABA. And I was like, no problem. It was nice meeting you. A year later, he called me back and he was like, I'd really like to re-meet. And I was like, great. I was about ready to have a baby. I was like, I'm not really sure this is the greatest time. My husband said, go back and talk to him. So I did. And, we just started talking about it, and he was really open. And I remember talking to my dad about it. And my dad said, well, why don't I come with you and have a conversation with him? My dad's really a business guy. He does mergers and acquisitions. He's a CPA. That is his background. And, so my dad came with us to the meeting. He was very, very upfront with Sam, my partner, about who my dad was. And, over the next several months, we spoke and we figured out, our partnership agreement and how we would work. We are partners and we work really well together. He has a brilliant business mind. He really understands how to grow a business and understands, because he already had a clinic and a pediatric therapy company, it made for a very good referral business for me. He also understood how the back end of an office worked, how insurance worked, how all that stuff that I really didn't have the experience yet happened. And so he has been a great mentor on that side for me. And, I brought all the ABA experience. And, we've been now working together for almost 7. Oh, my daughter's 7. So 7 years now. And it's been great. I ensure that, clinically we are sound. That is something that I made very, very clear that I was not budging on. And he ensures that we are, business-wise very healthy. And my father has continued to mentor us. Every single month he meets with us to do a strategy meeting. And I feel very blessed, to have both of them here to ensure that Steps grows. And we have.
I mean, let's talk a little bit about growth. So from an individual with an LLC creates a new partnership now to a team of nearly 300 employees serving and getting ready to serve 3 separate states, which is incredible to think about the journey and the growth. I want to talk a little bit about why that growth was necessary, because what a lot of people probably don't know who are tuning into the podcast is the immediate and necessity for services in the ABA space. So let's talk a little bit about the origin story of, okay, me and Sam are now partners. We create the business together. We open up the business. Is there automatic demand that creates necessity for growth, or what's happening in those early days?
I mean, it was wild. I'm not going to lie. There's a lot you don't know. There's a lot you figure out. We had to figure it out. There was a ton to figure out. There is so much demand in the ABA world in terms of clients. But we were trying to navigate the insurance rules and the Medicaid rules. All of that part was completely new to me. I knew IEPs and I knew the educational system. I did not necessarily know the medical model. So while I knew kids and autism and treatment plans and parent training and all of the ABA stuff, the medical model was very new to me. So there was a big learning curve there. Because Sam had background with, the therapy spot, he was able to, help and guide, but he didn't know ABA. And the rules had changed. The laws were this was in 2018. The laws for insurance, and I think Maryland accepting ABA, I think was started in 2014. So ABA and insurance accepting ABA was 4 years old. And so insurance companies didn't know who we were. They didn't know what a BCBA was. They didn't know. There was so much to learn. So it was wild.
Isn't that frustrating though? When you have a service to provide, now you have to deal with a regulatory board, is how I'll kind of put insurance labels, right, for this conversation. It reminds me a lot of when we first started in 2014, the telehealth business. We were trying to convince people that they could even use video because there were laws that were printed, but the people who were making decisions on reimbursement didn't even know about the laws. And so it's like, how do I navigate this space of necessity while trying to also inform the people who are willing to pay for this stuff?
Yeah.
It had to be a little bit frustrating.
It was frustrating, but like I remember my mom saying at one point, like just this is I don't know if this is appropriate to share, but she just kept saying like keep throwing shit against the wall and something will stick. And I just kept doing it. I just kept like going. I just did. And we'd hire people and I had our first RBT, her name is Jess. She was like a sophomore in college. She worked so hard. She was so young. She was my first employee. We worked super hard together. And then, we'd slowly bring on people. And then Courtney was one of my first BCBAs. I think she might have been my first BCBA. My friend Julia from the school system, like she took on a part-time case. Courtney took on a case, and then Courtney came on full-time. And like we just started figuring it out. We would slowly get cases, and at that time I was a treating BCBA and running. So I was running around like a chicken with my head cut off. We were not doing telehealth because we had no idea how to even go about that at that point. So yeah, it was wild. I mean, it was wild. But we were doing it, and we just slowly did it, and we slowly saw the hours were climbing, and we brought on somebody to help with insurance and credentialing and HR, and he started helping us grow. And I remember like, let's try and get to 1,000 billable hours a month. Let's get to 10 clients. Now we're hitting like, I think we're trying to hit like 11 to 12,000 hours a month. Like it's wild to think that, for us, that was wild. And there were times throughout that journey that I paused us, I mean, in 7 years, there was a point in time that I remember just being like, hold the brakes. Like we need to stop. It's too much. Too many kids are calling because there is such a need. Every family, it feels like every family needs ABA. But I felt like I didn't have, I was a clinical director. I was overseeing the practice. I had new BCBAs under me that needed guidance. I had new RBTs and behavior technicians who needed guidance. That was a lot of responsibility. And then I had families who required fabulous therapy and needed therapy. And my whole point of starting this was ensuring that they were getting good therapy. And I just felt like I couldn't do it all. So I remember somebody who I really trusted, a mentor of mine, saying to me, like, it's okay to stop taking clients and say, like, we need to just be where we are right now. And so I did.
This is really important. I want to talk on this for a second because this is something that a lot of younger entrepreneurs go through. They think they need to scale and grow at all costs, but scale often creates inefficiencies and bloat, which often leads to a deterioration in the service that we're offering, right? And when you're talking about the reputation of an organization like Steps, you only get one shot to make a first impression. And when it comes to the trust that's involved with treating someone's loved one, doubly important. So how did you weigh the element of saying, other than the conversation with your mentor, we got to put the brakes on here so we can shore up all the bucket or the holes in the bucket maybe?
There was no question. I could not keep going. I was so overwhelmed, and I knew that we couldn't provide the services that I wanted to. And I have never veered off that course. Like it's why I started this. It's just always been 100% my goal was to give really strong and good clinical services to kids. Like that was, I have a reputation, but I have a responsibility to these families. And when I couldn't support everybody in the way that I wanted to, and I felt like we were just spinning our circles and spinning our wheels, I said, we need to pause. I talked to, my partner. He was in agreement and in support of it. And I said, we just need to put some infrastructure into place, and we need to figure out our processes and our systems and do this. And, we did. And I don't remember exactly when that timeline is. I feel like COVID went in there. It almost happened. We almost stopped for too long because it did ultimately end up hurting us for a little bit. So we had
Hmm.
to do some recovery. But what was excellent about it was it helped us define roles. It helped us define process, um, what was working, what wasn't working, and get those things that we really needed to get back up. It helped define, like, my role was changing, and that's something that has happened. The reality is that that has happened. I think you come into something and you're a teacher, here's your job description, here's your role. When you come in and you're the entrepreneur, you're the president of the company, it's like, what is your job? It changes.
Everything.
Right, and it
You
changes
know?
every day. Like, the job
Yeah.
description is, I mean, some days I'm like fixing light bulbs, and I don't care. I'll change a diaper. I just don't care. I'll help with anything, to meeting with the marketing team, and making decisions on who the clinical director is.
I heard a really beautiful frame around this idea, and it was used talking about, like, what is the role of a CEO, of a founder, of a president, right? And often we think of being an executive officer or a leader of the executive team, right? But I heard a reframe, which was, you are the chief constraint officer. Your job is to identify constraints in the business and give your full attention towards those things so you can help the team grow and scale. What did you do in those early days of realizing that we came from the space of being an educator with a job description? Now we're an entrepreneur. So we trade in our 9 to 5 for a 365, 24/7, right? And now we have to do things like encourage others, build team culture, be able to put people in positions to win, coach them up. How did you kind of deal with that realization of, like, okay, I really have to pour all of myself into the team, which wasn't really what maybe we expected when we kind of got into this venture?
So I'll tell you, I think I have two answers. First of all, the mentorship, the leadership part was pretty easy for me. I was a teacher. So as a
Hmm.
teacher, you like to do those things. I was also a mentor teacher. I worked with Towson University as a mentor teacher. I always had student teachers under me. Um, so I liked, and I like still doing that. And helping people, now I don't have a class of, 4 or 5 or 6, children with disabilities. I have a staff of 300 that I'm mentoring and supervising and supporting and helping them grow their careers. But that comes with a lot of, sometimes I'm putting on my social worker hat, sometimes I'm putting on my educator hat, sometimes I'm putting on my parenting hat. Like, there's a lot of hats that,
Hmm.
I wear on a very regular basis. And that part for me, I liked. I did have to really work on boundaries. You can't work every day of your life. I had to learn, what was important for now and what could wait. Um, and I'll tell you, my partner and my dad were really, and my husband also they were really, really, really helpful in helping me with the. My partner's outstanding at figuring out, like, these are the things we need to focus on. This person needs to go into that position. Like, he has a great brain for that. Like, that
Yeah,
is
an operator.
he's excellent at that. That's really something that I've learned a lot from him. And that I don't think I was so natural at that. I was on the clinical side. I could see that clinically, but in terms of business side, figuring out, like, a director of operations, and when it was time to, excuse me, get a recruiter, or some of the things the business side, in the beginning, I was way out of my league there. I had no idea. So thank goodness for him. My dad also very much was helpful, and always lended an ear and, an opinion, and, helped with that. Um, but you're working a lot. There's a lot of sleepless nights, and COVID threw a crazy wrench in all of it. because, you were living and breathing at home all the time. We did start telehealth at the beginning of COVID, which was something that we were getting ready to do, but we decided like we have
Got to
to.
get after it.
So ready, go, then we'll set. And so that was fun. But we did it, and we didn't really miss a beat. COVID, and we ended up growing during COVID.
And this is an interesting dynamic as well. When you're a part of a business sector, right, that has overwhelming demand for services, what are some of the challenges that come along with that? Because everybody else who's listening to this, who's starting a tech company or something like that, is like, we are fighting tooth and nail to be able to build our business and get customers. But you guys aren't dealing with that. So what's the challenges that come along with that?
For us, I think the biggest challenge was staffing. Staffing has been huge. Trying to find the right staff that are really interested in what we do, held the same values, and understood what it takes to do what we do every day. Wasn't just wanting to be there to collect a paycheck, and wanted to really work with children and work hard, and had the same dedication and passion that I did. That's hard. That's hard to find.
What do you do in a scenario when somebody is not a cultural fit? I talked to a leader from a health system in Eastern Kentucky, and he talked about, although we are underneath stress to find more nurses and healthcare professionals, I also have to be a steward of the culture here. So what happens when we bring in somebody out of necessity, but they're not a good fit for the culture and they don't have those aligning passions like that?
It's so hard. It's something that I struggle with a lot. I find that I then have to take back when I find that our personalities don't align, and I pull back and I look at skill set. And do they have the skill set and the ability to make decisions about the client, the clinical decisions that are going to put the child first and the family first? And if I feel like they're going to make those decisions, then I'm fine with it. When that isn't the case, then I can't do it. So if I feel like they will represent steps in a way that is ultimately going to be positive, they are going to provide good, sound, clinical, ethical services and therapy to our children and their families, I'm okay with it. We don't have to see eye to eye on everything. Nobody's going to have the same, people aren't going to come from my same background, so you can't expect everything to be the same. That's okay. Families aren't the same as my family. I'm okay with that. I actually love that diversity. But you have to, the skill set or the interest in collaborating to learn must be there.
Curiosity is how I would put this, right?
The curiosity and the openness and the humbleness, right? If you're not humble, that's a problem.
This is an interesting concept I like to bring into the conversation when appropriate. I call this the instant gratification trap. So, because of all the ways in which we engage with different types of systems and services and just consumer behavior today, everything is instant. And I worry about generations of people who are coming out of school and they expect to have that instant gratification from their career. Now, the other side of the instant gratification trap also happens in leadership, because often we don't have, as leaders, maybe the patience that it takes to invest into people to help them become the next generational leader of our business. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
What do you think about that trap?
Yeah, it's a big one. I think that I've had this with some of our leadership team, wanting that next person. And I'm like, okay, well, have you tried this strategy? I think as a special educator, I'm used to patience, and providing strategies. So I try and help my leadership team, like, find some strategies, but at the same time, some of them have helped me being like, okay, but there needs to be a timeline because we're a business and we need to move forward. So I think that there's a balance there, right? And having people need time to learn and need time to grow and need benchmarks and feedback, and you need to be able to provide those benchmarks and that feedback, and figure out what are they motivated for, what's their why, what's their motivation, and if they're not getting there, you know, is there something that we can provide them, or is there something that is it just not a fit? There have been certain individuals within the company that they're in a position where the position isn't right, and I've been able to put them in other positions and they've thrived. And I've had other people that I've put in positions and I put them in different positions, and it's just not we're not the right space for them. Um, and that's okay. That it is what it is.
This level of intentionality is what I think more leaders need to lean into, because often we hire for a job description, right? But one of the things that I recognize is you can hire for character and attitude. You can train for skills. And a lot of the times I love that. A lot of the times we can lean into the element of taking the time as a leader to say, Erin, what do you want out of this job? Where do you want to go? And how can we use this business as an opportunity to take you there? It's almost like train them so good that they won't leave, or train them so good that they can leave, and treat them so good that they don't. I don't feel like we get a lot of that holistic approach in leadership today. And I feel like a lot of leaders are focused on the results rather than helping the team grow, which then as a lagging indicator creates the results, if that makes sense.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I always say that people don't leave companies, they leave managers or leaders. And, you have to build relationships with people. The idea, something that I worry about a lot, we're using a lot of remote people these days. We're losing a lot of, I'm a in the office kind of person. I like to be in person. I think part of that is just being able to be around people and build those relationships. But the reality is that's not our world so much anymore. Um, I think that taking that time to build those relationships that were really, really important.
I want to
So
say in 2022, right, there was the Surgeon General came onto a national broadcast and talked about the biggest threat to society was isolation and loneliness. Now, I have a macro theory that because so many people feel alone because of lack of connection on social media, I'm pointing to my phone over here for everybody's watching, lack of connection in our social lives, right? I feel like we are deep down yearning for work and the relationships that we have in work to fulfill some of those gaps that might be in our life. And this is a real opportunity for leaders today to think about how does our organization fill some of those gaps by making people feel seen, validated, and heard. Because I feel like secretly we're yearning for that sense of connection, but it's tougher than ever with distributive teams and remote teams.
yeah, it's really hard. It's really, really hard. It's something I worry about. I really do. I think that trying to be purposeful with reaching out to people, I'm still trying to get a grasp of it. We really, we're very new on our administrative team to having remote employees. And I try and, we have some group threads and chats and stuff going on, and we try and send little things out to try and make it exciting and fun, but it's hard.
Mm-hmm.
I just realized I was on a meeting, 2 meetings this week with 2 new employees that I haven't actually had a one-on-one conversation with, and I cannot stand that. So that to me is like something that I need to like make sure I set up some one-on-one meetings with these 2 new employees, because I'm not used to that. I'm used to knowing every single person. And I know that at some point we're going to get to the point where I might not know every single person, but I know that I can still walk into the clinics. We have 2 clinics. We have 2 clinics that kids can go to in Maryland, and we're hoping to open up a third. But I still walk into those clinics, and the staff know me. The kids, I know the kids. And, we're still at a point where, we've for sure grown, but I try and make myself seen. And I don't, it's one of the things, when we talk about growth and getting into, other spaces that keeps me up at night. Because I still have my fingerprint on steps, and I want to ensure that that doesn't leave.
I was talking to a CEO named Gino from an organization in Connecticut earlier in the week, maybe last week. And part of our conversation, he brought an interesting theory called walking leadership. So what he likes to do as a CEO is he likes to walk the campus of their organization, and he likes to have one-on-one conversations. But he said it's more difficult than ever to do that because of conflicting time schedules and everything else like that. So he's always trying to be curious about how does he use things like technology, right, and innovation to help spread his message so he can engage in one-on-one video chat with people, or one-on-one messages of encouragement, or a pat on the shoulder when they're having a tough day. We have to be curious enough as leaders to think about how are we going to be able to create connection at scale, right? And that's where I feel like technology can kind of play a role in this space. Speaking of technology, how are you thinking about technology in steps? Because you guys have to do more with less out of necessity to meet the demand of the clients and the families. So what's kind of your strategy when it comes to using and adopting technology?
So obviously we use a ton of technology. Our each staff member has in our clinics, each staff member gets an iPad where they can collect data for the children. Some of our kids get iPads in turn for communication devices, for AAC devices. Our staff, we utilize, communication boards. We use a service called Monday.com for, management teams and services, which is phenomenal. We love it. We use, a ton of different technologies. And we're always trying to see, what else is out there to see how, we can make life a little bit better and a little bit easier, for us. I pay some attention to some of the AI stuff that's out there to see how that can help. And, it's interesting because Rethink is what we use for our practice management, and they're starting to come out with some tools to help with, writing session notes. And I have to see, something just came out about writing session notes, which I'm curious about. I have a feeling some treatment plan writing will be coming. I'm curiously optimistic, but also a little bit concerned about it. I worry that it's going to cause people to be a little lazy. And I want to make sure that, treatment plans are written intentionally and individually, and not, mass produced and done sloppily. So it's something that I'm really cautious about. I like the idea for I think, reasons that are, pretty clear, but, I'm a little worried about it also.
I mean, and this is only natural, right? Coming from this space. Now, when I first got into the game of healthcare back in 2014, we were in the huge migration towards electronic health records. So I would go into a hospital system and they'd be like, hey, we've got a lot going on. We're migrating to an EHR. And I was like, what does that involve? They said, you see those 20 file cabinets over there? That's all of our patient records that we need to turn digital. Right. And so it's a big transformation.
I am so happy that all of mine's digital. Like I will never have that file room.
It's crazy. I mean, but I think we once again have to think about, there's an element of critical thinking, right, that comes into this, because one of the biggest issues that we see with artificial intelligence, or people who use it often, is they take the output as the gospel. Right. They say this system can do no wrong.
Correct.
And so when we talk about individualized care plans, we talk about documentation, I do get worried that everybody's like, let me skim through this, looks good to me, send it. You know what I mean? And like, what are the ramifications and outcomes later down the road? So we have to be critical thinkers in order to make sure that that information is correct.
Yeah, it's really something I'm worried about. I mean, I talked to my sister-in-law's a high school social studies and psychology teacher. We talk about these kids turning in papers that are AI written, they can spot them with, the drop of a hat, these teachers. And we all can. We can all spot. We've gotten some letters from young college students that are, maybe behavioral techs with us, and we're like, okay, so ChatGPT wrote this, for you. And it's you got to be careful. I think it can be an interesting first draft of something, but to bounce something off of, but you really need to use your brain.
But if it's using vocabulary that you normally don't use, then that's a dead giveaway as well. Exactly. Like your vocabulary increased by 20 points. What's going on here? Exactly. Overnight as well. Yeah, exactly. The last thing that I want to talk about is kind of some elements of fulfillment. Okay. So one of the scariest parts about being an entrepreneur is some of the chasing of finish lines. Okay. One of the things that I've personally recognized is often it's easy for people who are in this brotherhood and sisterhood to imagine a life that is going to give us fulfillment. And then we obtain all of the things that we said were going to make us happy, and we realize that it couldn't be more false. How many times are we willing to make that mistake? Have you ever come across the element of saying, when I get to here, like you said earlier, 1,000 hours, 10,000, 12,000 hours, something's going to be different, but maybe it didn't align with kind of your true self interior?
It's interesting. I kept saying, like, my partner has asked me, like, a couple times, like, is this still like what you want? Do you still like this? And I'm still having fun. So for me, like, I'm still enjoying it. I'm still having a good time. It's still like, I still want to come to work every day. So yeah, for me, it's worth it. We're finally at a point where, like, financially it's starting to become worth it. Which is, very helpful from a, logistical standpoint. I can, like, support my family. Great. That makes my husband very happy. And I'm enjoying it. I feel like I'm really helping the community. I'm helping a lot of children in Maryland. I'm hoping in time to be helping a lot of children in other states, which is really important. But I'm also helping, I think about my staff and my employees. I'm helping a lot of families. And that's a big deal to me. So I love that. I really love that. And maybe when it stops being fun, I don't know. I really love what we do. I'm really proud of it. I still have some things that I want to do. I feel like, we've got things to do still.
There's a saying, it is having things isn't fulfilling. Getting them is. The process of the journey is so important. And that's something I've tried to consistently create a reframe in my mind of, I very transparently have put finish lines on the amount of monthly revenue, the amount of customers, the amount of things that I can purchase, the vehicle, all this kind of stuff. And the scariest experience that I've come across is obtaining those things and realizing that nothing changes. And so I'm constantly in the battle as an entrepreneur and trying to refocus myself to be able to recognize that it's the trajectory that I'm on is more important than the mountaintops that I've touched along the journey, if that makes sense.
It's interesting. I'm much more of an experienced person than a material person. So I don't necessarily care about that stuff. There's things that I want to be able to do. There's things for my kids I want them to be able to do. So if I could have that freedom to be able to do those things, great. The stuff I just don't care about. I really don't care.
I understand that. I want to close with a moment of gratitude. So this week I was walking on the treadmill in the morning at the gym, and I had been reflecting on kind of the journey of being an entrepreneur. So I started my business in 2014 in July, and I just crossed 10 years. And as I was sitting there walking, I was thinking about all the hardships and all the things that I've overcome to get to where I'm at now. And it made me reflect on all the times when I thought we weren't going to be able to pull it off, all the stressful moments when I doubted my journey, all the times when I wanted to fold, but then I said, you know what, I'll just give it a little bit longer. And 10 years later, I'm standing here. Do you ever get time to pause, seriously, and reflect on how many lives you've impacted and the team that you've been able to build and the business as an entrepreneur that you've been able to grow?
A little bit. I think recently I have stopped and thought about it. And sometimes throughout the way I've thought about it, it is hard to take that pause and think about the number of kids I've worked with and the number of kids that Steps has worked with, that I've, clearly had a hand in, or they wouldn't have had the service. It's a lot, and it's impressive, and it's exciting. And I'm grateful to have had that opportunity. I think we're constantly worried that, did we do enough? Did we help enough? Did we help the staff enough? You have staff members that come, you have staff members that leave, and, they leave for whatever reason. And, I have helped a lot of staff members, or at least tried to help a lot of staff members, in various states of being, and, and people are coming, I think, in this time, and at this time, with a variety of mental health issues and challenges and just life challenges. And we see all of that. And, it's something that, we take seriously here. And I've always tried to help people through. And I hope that, when they've been here at Steps, or if they are still at Steps, I have many people who've been here for a really long time, that, that they're appreciative, and that they, have, gotten something from that. So that's my hope.
Well, I know that you're doing an amazing job. As we kind of land the plane here, I want to give you the opportunity, Erin, to kind of call your shot, right? Like Babe Ruth. What's the future going to look like with Steps over the next, let's say, 2 years?
Our goal is to keep doing really strong work. My hope is to get ourselves into a couple different states and really up and running in those states, possibly a couple clinics in those states, and just continue to grow and help more families with autism get the services that they need. I'm really excited. I don't think I've talked about Steps University, but it's a program for RBTs who are working towards their master's in ABA to become hopefully BCBAs. And we've successfully graduated a couple of students and set their careers forward. And we're excited for a couple of Steps University people to be starting with Steps soon. They're working on their exams actually as we speak. One just passed, so that's really exciting. So we're excited, and I hope to, like I said, continue to help new people in their career just become, professionals in the industry, so that we can just keep helping more and more people. So,
well, that's amazing. Absolutely. Well, as we kind of close our episode here, we've got a tradition where our previous guest wanted to ask you a question. Their question was, what is one skill that you wish you started developing 1 to 3 years ago?
Delegation. Being
Delegation.
able to delegate better. I think that I always used to say, oh, it'll just take me a few minutes. I think and I always thought it was helping somebody. If I would just do it for them. Oh, they always have so much on their plate. Let me just help it. Now let me do it. And I think that delegating back, or giving the feedback to, this is how you need to do it, even if it would take them longer, is the way to go, because it helps build their skill set. And all of those little tasks just made more work for me. So I didn't necessarily get to do some of the things that I needed to do, and I just think it's just a skill. It's so important. And I feel like I'm finally getting there. It's still something that I'm not 100% with, but it's something that is extremely important.
There is an element which is the highest form of compassion, is delegation, allowing people to make mistakes, right? So they can learn, so they can be self-sufficient, so they can be empowered. And that was a lesson that I learned from a previous guest as well. And I thought that was beautiful. Well, everybody who's been tuning in today, I just want to give a huge thanks to Erin Stern for all of the work that she does. Seriously, Steps is an amazing organization. You guys are having a huge impact. And for everybody who's tuning in, watching, and listening, that was amazing. Thank you so much for being on the show. I really appreciate it.
Thanks for having me.
There we go. That's a wrap.